they'd say it as a form of compliment na pag sinabing para kang lalaki maglaro, it's a compliment. Pero pag sinabihan ka na para kang babae maglaro or meron pa nga na para ka namang bakla sumuntok. So, it seems like femininity is being perceived as a weakness.
Hi, I'm Tantengco-Malolos and you're listening to Go Hard Girls. We're back with another special episode made possible by the Go Hard Girls grants. Since 2019, we've been championing the stories of fearless Filipina athletes. Now, it's time to pass the mic because the real game changer is helping others tell more stories of strong, unstoppable women. With the support of the Australian Broadcasting Corporation International Development and the Women in News and Sports Initiative, the Go Hard Girls grants give training and publication opportunities to deserving storytellers. Today's grantee is a multi-hyphenate in her own right, a sports writer and an actress with a passion for women empowerment.
Hi, I'm Marit Samson, an AV Communication graduate from Ateneo de Manila University and a former sports writer and broadcast correspondent of The Guidon. Back in 2023, I published an article for The Guidon entitled Play Like a Girl. It featured female athletes from Valorant, lawn tennis, and softball sharing their thoughts on that common compliment among Filipinos, para kang lalaki maglaro. Yes, it's usually intended as a compliment, but yeah, let's talk about that.
Hi everyone, I'm Eirenne Lumasang. I've been doing the same sport since I was 6 years old, taekwondo. I was part of the national team before, and also I captained Ateneo taekwondo during my collegiate years. Right now, I'm a professor at the Ateneo John Gokongwei School of Management.
Before she could even tie her own belt, Eirenne Lumasang was already walking onto the mat. Born into a family where martial arts wasn't just a hobby, but a heritage. Irene's journey started at 6 years old, not because someone forced her to do it, but because someone dreamed it for her.
I started learning taekwondo at the age of 6, out of my family's influence. So my grandpa is a judo instructor, my dad did aikido, but it was actually my mom who had a huge influence in my engagement with martial arts. She was the one who enrolled me in taekwondo. She'd accompany me to training and competitions, like every single training and competition. And I think it's because it's something that she wanted for herself. Because way back in the 80s, when she was in college, she enrolled herself in karate. But she wasn't really able to pursue it despite her dad being a practitioner of martial arts. Because what my grandpa told her is, oh, panlalaki yan. So it was only when she turned in her 40s that she was actually able to pursue it.
That someone was her mother, a woman whose own journey into martial arts was delayed by the words, panlalaki yan. Martial arts is just for boys. But instead of handing this tradition down to Eirenne, she opened the door wide open for her daughter, giving her the support she herself didn't receive. So, for Eirenne, the family legacy was not just inherited, but redefined.
I noticed nga na I have cousins and even uncles who really begin training martial arts at a very young age. But it wasn't them who actually pursued it. It was my mom na talagang engaged with martial arts. So I use it as a form of motivation na I came from this family of martial artists. And of course, although traditionally it's a male-dominated sport, it's really a challenge to fight the tides.
Eirenne grew up surrounded by male cousins and uncles who dabbled in martial arts. But it was her mother, the only woman in that web of fighters, who showed her what it means to commit. From local competitions to palarong pambansa, all the way to captaining the Ateneo Taekwondo team, Irene's path has always been about more than medals. It's been about meaning.
From grassroots until collegiate level, I've been really active competing. And I think ang very defining moment was really during college. Kasi during college, of course, we've been aware of different theories. We've been aware on what's happening in our society. Um, that's when it opened up my eyes na ang daming gender-based stereotypes, be it inside or outside sports.
College was when she started seeing the sport and the world differently. Being on the receiving end of gender based prejudices and stereotypes, it became clearer and clearer for Eirenne that gender wasn't just a line on a form, it was something that shaped spaces and shaped stories.
I was the captain of Ateneo Taekwondo. So Ateneo Taekwondo, martial arts, it's really male dominated. Both in physical space and in discourse, it's really been occupied by the male. So it's really a challenge, but at the same time, for me, I really don't see gender as an issue or a hindrance for me to be able to captain the team.
Eirenne found her power early, both on the mat and in the challenge of proving that strength has no gender. But her fight didn't end when the matches did, because for Eirenne, being an athlete was only the beginning.
For me, right now I'm teaching sports management, and I thought that after college I'll be pursuing other industries. But I went back to my roots, sports fitness, because I've been inspired by sports management professor, so Coach Jock Kubar and Ja Agkawili, doing research, those things, they really inspired me na.
Today, Eirenne has evolved into being an educator, a thought leader in martial arts and sports culture. Just as she is on the mat, she brings intensity, discipline, and a hunger for change in the academe. For generations, martial arts have been rooted in rituals, handed down and practiced without question. But Eirenne asks, what if we did things differently? Is this really the right way to do it?
Ngayon kasi, for so long, martial arts, it's all about tradition. But right now, those people in the field, science-based professors, practitioners, I look up to them na hindi dapat maging dogmatic yung thinking natin na we rely on tradition. Because right now, yung mga tradition kasi, it has adverse effects sa ating mga athletes or sa mga practitioners natin. So, if we open our eyes through research, discourse, when you start to question things kasi, that's when you realize, that's when we move forward.
Inspired by her mentors and instructors, she now carves out space in science, discourse, and data, because she believes that to protect athletes, you have to reform the system that trains them. Eirenne says the fight isn't just in the gym, but also in the culture, and that includes the language, the spaces, and even the silence.
Kasi, yes, we're talking about it, but if tradition, people really put high regards on tradition na hindi, panlalaki to, atin to. It's really hard to penetrate through discourse sa mga ganun. So, ang dami pa rin until now, be it in the sport itself or in the fitness industry, meron pa rin yung male bravado, yung pag masculine ka, it's as if you own the space. So, napakalaking bagay or napakalaki ng influence ng discourse sa mga ganitong issue natin Kasi if hindi natin siya napag-uusapan, hindi natin mababago yung sporting culture. It's like we're being silenced in this kind of issues that we should be talking about.
Even today, martial arts is still seen by many as a man's world. To many, strength has a certain look, a certain sound.
We knew naman na sports back then, especially martial arts, it's really male-dominated na they already occupied the space, both physically and in discourse, where it's them. This specific gender is what martial arts practitioners see as the standard. And anything else outside that is the opposite.
In the classroom, Eirenne dismantles an outdated system. On the mat, she questions routines. But she says sometimes the most powerful obstacles or interventions come not from grand theories, but from the words we hear every day. Words like, para kang lalaki maglaro.
Actually, I've been hearing that statement quite a lot, especially when I was younger. Back then, I really didn't know. I did not understand how problematic that statement was because I think it's really deeply ingrained in our sporting culture that the standard is lalaki dapat yung galawan. They'd say it as a form of compliment na pag sinabing para kang lalaki maglaro, it's a compliment. Pero pag sinabihan ka na para kang babae maglaro or meron pa nga na para ka namang bakla sumuntok. So, it seems like femininity is being perceived as a weakness. As a kid, I was like a sponge. So, I really took it as a compliment kasi no one seems to have a problem with that. But I didn't know, I did not understand. And admittedly, it was very recent lang when I realized na ang problematic ng linyang to. Kasi women tayo, we're being portrayed as weak. As if we don't belong there, as if we don't belong in these spaces. And that if we want to enter that arena, we have to be like them, which I think strips us of our expression as female. And I realize it shouldn't be that way, right?
Para kang lalaki maglaro is a phrase many young girls in sports grow up hearing. And on the surface, it sounds like a praise, a compliment, a badge of honor. Play like a boy and you're extraordinary. Play like a girl and suddenly you're less. Like so many of us, Irene first absorbed the phrase without question. But the older she got, the more she noticed. The phrase wasn't harmless. It was a mirror of a culture in martial arts that sets men as the standard and everyone else as the exception. That kind of praise came with conditions. To be good, you had to play like a man. To belong, you had to move like them. And in this kind of sporting culture, femininity will always be treated as a weakness.
Kasi training programs namin is more on parang it's designed for male. And for me, as a female, ang nakita kong advantage ko is more on flexibility and speed as a female martial arts practitioner. So sabi ko, bakit paulit-ulit yung training program natin na it's catered to them? Why not focus on ano ba yung advantage or leverage namin as female athletes? Bakit pati sa training program naka-base doon? So, nakikita natin na it's just a phrase, right? Phrase lang siya eh. Pero, naapektuhan niya rin yung training program natin, yung standards natin, without acknowledging. And for so long, ganun yung nangyayari. And ang dami nating figures or in the martial arts na ang ina-idolize natin is lalaki. Pero very few yung female figures in the field of martial arts that we idolize.
Irene started noticing it in the training programs. And that included drills and workouts tailored to bigger bodies and brute force. That single phrase had written itself into programs, into standards, and into what gets called elite.
When masculinity is made as the standard, hindi natin na ma-maximize yung other skills that we could work on. Flexibility, speed, balance, stability. Those are the things na yung mga science-based din, alam nila na female really thrive in these components. So kung ang focus natin with martial arts is all about power, yung mga ganun angasan, not that I'm saying that it's that all the time, but we know how prevalent that is for so long. So, if hindi natin nakikita na there are other things na, qualities ng female, na yun yung advantage nila, hindi natin siya ma-maximize, hindi natin ma-maximize yung peak athletic performance ng mga athletes natin. We'll just be limited on what we perceive as, sige, pag malakas ka sumipa, okay na yun, magaling ka na. But then there are other aspects then that we need to work on. And it's nice to see kung yung isang atleta, they possess yung mga ganoong skills. People outside our sport, they'd even assume our genders. Na just because we're engaged in a traditionally male-dominated sport, they'd say na, oh, boyish ka siguro, ganito, ganyan. So it limits also our expression outside the sport na just because somehow we're excelling in a male-dominated sport, parang sasabihin mo na boyish kami, kaya ganon. Hindi ba pwedeng we excel because we're females and we can do kung ano man yung kayang gawin ng mga male. And it's not that we're trying to prove out here that one is better than the other, but what we want is not to be boxed in this kinds of gender-based stereotypes.
Boxed in before the bout even starts. If you dominate taekwondo, you must be boyish. If you appear girly, you cannot be taken seriously. This stereotype forces female athletes to only pick one, either be strong or be feminine. But Eirenne says, why not both?
Well, of course, I started as a kid, and then adolescence came in. Of course, we have ways to express ourselves. I'd wear eyelash extension, tinted lip balm during games, and of course, so did other girls in my sport. And I think when I reached college, I really appreciate those girly girls na nakakalaban ko, na talagang nag-aayos pa rin sila na they're not letting it na just because for so long ganun, kailangan mag-conform tayo to what they expect us to be. Kasi it's a male-dominated sport, and it just because for so long they occupy the space, it doesn't mean that we have to live up to their whatever unwritten rules these pioneers, quote unquote, have set. So I believe that there's no need to change yourself or who you are, or just to appear strong.
Feminine expression is not mutually exclusive from strength, but judgment lands quicker than a roundhouse kick. And the target is rarely the skills and talent, but the forma, how macho or girly an athlete looks.
I think sometimes para bang most of the time they'd say na, oy, ayos na ayos ka, para bang sa competition. Minsan din, example, other girls, pag, example, red yung lips, blush on sila, they'd get judged. And at the back of my head, as long as it's not affecting their performance naman, or their playing style, as long as they'd be able to maximize what they learn during trainings, why not? Why judge them for it? So, personally, I also experienced that. I remember being introduced na para bang my friend asked this mutual friend, common friend namin na kilala ba raw ako in my field, kilala ba raw ako, magaling ba daw ako? And then ang sagot nitong common friend namin, yes, kilala raw ako, madami daw nagkakagusto. So, it was during college, and then, nasa isip ko, yun lang ba ako? Para bang, not to sound boastful about it, but I believe naman I have a number of medals under my belt. Pero, doon ako nakilala. So, para bang, it's very limiting. It's very limiting na, siguro if it's a different gender, if I'm a male ba, yun lang ba yung malilimit ba ako? The same way na right now, nalilimit ako by my looks or the way I express myself. Kasi imagine, all your life, you've worked hard to be in that position, but people will just see you for what you look like, for more on the external, not on the skills that you possess. Parang a lot has changed, but still, I agree na malayo na, pero malayo pa. And ako, hopeful naman ako na in the future, people would really move away from those kind of thinking na nalilimit, kasi it's very harmful.
It all goes beyond the gender binary of male and female, masculine and feminine. Eirenne asks, What happens when the language we use within the sport targets not just gender, but sexuality? Like there's that other line we've all heard and know, para kang bakla maglaro.
Kasi there are a lot of members ng LGBT community yung sobrang galing nila with their sport, sobrang galing nila with martial arts. And ngayon, ina-expect nila na basta ba may feminine ka, anything that's related with you being feminine, it's something negative na. Pag ganun ka, weak ka na. And ang problematic niya kasi outside sports, there are members of the LGBT community who are martial arts practitioner who remains at the closet. Hindi sila makalabas. Hindi nila ma-express yung sarili nila dahil despite them being magaling, in this kind of sporting culture, mag-iiba yung tingin sa kanila.
The label bakla gets weaponized the moment an athlete's movement is read as too fluid, too graceful, or too soft for the masculine standard in martial arts.
For instance, during sparring, syempre it's a contact sport. Parang, if a male athlete, cisgender male athlete would spar with nag-out na member of the LGBT community, alam mo yun, yung they would mock na, for example, nagkakadikit. Kasi it's normal, clinching. Nagkakadikit. Di bilang, mga ganun-ganun, mag-aasaran sila. And, alam mo yun, parang it's affecting the space for training. It's not a safe space also for the members of the community. And actually, during our one of our conversations nga with sa mga research namin, may mga female athletes na nag-raise din ng concern na they feel unsafe sa spaces na ganito. Na it's not a safe space for them to actually train para ma-maximize yung skills nila. Kasi it's awkward.
In that instant, talent can vanish behind stereotypes as some queer athletes choose safety over visibility. Even seemingly harmless locker room jokes or playful teasing during training can create an unsafe space for athletes, suppressing their full athletic potential and prowess to fully flourish.
Can we just focus on the skills of the people rather than imposing this gender-based stereotypes that is very limiting?
Visibility and representation is not enough. The need for structural change that is deliberate, evidence-based, and truly inclusive is very urgent. So, how do we really make this happen?
Can I just say that I really appreciate how right now people are starting to move away from dogmatic thinking and starting to question everything. Kasi once you start to question it, that's when you try to find answers. And when you try to find answers, that's when you do research, discourse, you talk about this with other people. Napakalaking bagay ng research. Kasi research talagang pinag-aralan, you consider yung voice ng mga stakeholder, and hindi mo siya pinangunahan in a way na, oh, I think this is what you need. I think this is what has to be done. But with research kasi, you listen to their voices, you consider their opinions, and in that way, na hindi mo sila pinangunahan, pinakinggan mo ano talaga yung kailangan nila, doon natin ma-address yung mga pangangailangan ng mga athletes, especially for female athletes. It really plays a huge part in shaping traditional sporting cultures. That's when we realize na traditionally male-dominated sport is not limited lang to male athletes or masculine females. And vice versa, same with traditionally female-dominated sports, male could also thrive in that arena. So, doon mo makikita na, hindi siya, example, what if your vocation talaga is martial artist ako despite this being my gender? Hindi siya limiting. And in that way, training programs and also the standards that we set to our athletes, hindi lang siya limited. Hindi natin nililimit yung athletes natin. We really look into how can we maximize their skills. Hindi lang, basta dito lang yung pinupunto natin sa training programs. Talagang mina-maximize natin how will we bring out the best in our athletes.
Eirenne believes in data. But more than that, she also believes in dialogue. Imagine a training environment where athletes aren't pushed to conform, but supported to excel as they are, where queerness isn't erased, but embraced, where femininity isn't sidelined, but centered, where strength is not filtered through gender, but drawn from diversity. While there is a long way to go, change is indeed happening, especially with the way media is continuously shining a light on gendered issues in sports. This is what the start of a shift looks like.
Platforms like this, the media, it plays a huge part in this ongoing discourse. Kasi tuloy-tuloy lang to eh. How we frame it, and of course, its reach. It has the power to really catalyze discourse, shape sporting cultures, and of course, influence the perception. Right now, the way media frames it, and then the fact that we're here right now talking about it, it's already a progress in itself.
We've talked about breaking barriers, questioning tradition, rewriting training programs, and reclaiming language. So let's end this episode where all great stories begin, with a vision.
For me, I know that it's really hard, but there's a glimmer of hope. And na-envision ko for female athletes across different sports is that they'd be able to pursue what they really want without these gender-based stereotypes limiting them. And of course, I was hoping na more sports law or programs will be implemented to sustain this vocation. Hindi lang, of course, for female athletes, but for athletes, for all of our athletes na nakikita nila yung sarili nila na ito yung vocation ko, ito yung role ko sa mundong to. Yeah, we're just talking about it now, but I hope a lot of people na maririnig to, kahit papaano, hindi man ma-change or ma-influence yung perception nila, they'd start to question. Kasi once we start asking questions, very philosophical, dun talaga maghahanap tayo ng mga sagot. Bakit ganito? That's when we question, tama pa ba to?
It all begins when you start to question. Because once we ask why, we start demanding how. And that how is the blueprint for the next generation of athletes. As a sports researcher and educator, Eirenne herself is at the forefront of reshaping young athletes who are next in line.
When I teach students, be it taekwondo or in sports management, the first thing that I usually do is to ask them, ano ba yung role ng sports sa buhay mo? And of course, it could be a love-hate relationship. It could be something na parang love ng dad niya, so love niya na rin. So, yung mga ganun, what I usually do is for them to gain appreciation with sports. Find their role in sports. They could be sports manager or athletes themselves or just sports fans. Find their role in sport. And then, if you see your role kasi doon, and of course, pag nakita mo yung role mo, sports fan ka, nakita mo na ganun yung treatment. Once you start to observe, that's when you start to ask questions. And when we start ask questions and we find answers, that's when we start demanding for actions. So doon, if it's coming out of love, if it's coming from, ito yung role ko dito eh, and I'm coming from a place of concern, care, love, we start to ask questions, and of course, demand for actions, accountability.
Love for their game and love for the community. That's the fuel. When athletes, coaches, fans, and the media all come together knowing their role in sports, breaking barriers and changing tradition becomes possible. And to share her burning hope and bright vision for the future of female athletes, Eirenne has one last message to all women in sports out there.
Girls, we can do both. We can compete sparring. We can really maximize our skills here in our fields. But at the same time, hindi naman natin plan compromise yung the way we express ourselves. I think that's my message na for them to always remember that we can do both.
Simple, powerful, unapologetic. Girls can do both. victory and femininity, strength and softness, no compromise required.
Irene, for our very last question, what is a go hard girl to you?
For me, a go hard girl is someone who's really determined and not really afraid, even though they're pursuing a path that not all people are taking. And that's what a go hard girl is for me.
That was such a lovely story, Marit. What was the most meaningful part of the process for you?
The most meaningful part of the process is that Irene and we are different in a way that Irene is an athlete and I am a sports fan. But then we are fighting for the same cause and we are fighting for the same change that can happen or that we want to happen in sports.
That's the same cause we're all pushing for here at Go Hard Girls. So my question is, what is a Go Hard Girl for you, Marit?
A go hard girl for me is someone who is unapologetic and someone who doesn't follow the rules.